welcome to Fiction Fans, a podcast where we read books and fan fiction too. I'm Lily.
And I'm Sarah, and I am so pleased that we are welcoming back onto the podcast Ciel Pierlot to talk about fan fiction with us.
Hello, everybody.
Thank you for coming on.
Yep, thank you for having me back.
So excited to hang out with you again and talk about all of our greatest pleasure fan fiction.
Yes.
But before we do, what's something great that happened lately?
My parents had their 5-year wedding anniversary last weekend.
Oh,
congrats.
Happy 5-year anniversary.
There was a party and everything. It was great.
That's awesome.
My good thing is also 5 years. I passed 5 years at my job and they gave me a gift card and I was able to buy books. So yay.
Books are great. I gotta say, 5 years of marriage is more exciting than 5 years of job.
I mean, yes. Yes.
Not that it's a competition, but
I don't know. I mean, it depends on the job.
Well, I think
if you get paid a lot,
and depends on the marriage, I guess. I was giving the benefit of the doubt.
I think in this case, probably the marriage is more exciting.
My good thing has 0 milestones involved, but I did recently get the Lord of the Rings board game, Journeys of Middle-earth, and it's super fun. It actually feels like it was made by people who love Middle-earth and not just people who slapped, the One Ring logo on the box to make money. So that's really nice. I don't know. Lord of the Rings merchandise can be really hit or miss, but this was a really, really great hit, and it's been a lot of fun, and I'm enjoying it immensely. So that's awesome.
We'll have to play it sometime when we are together.
Yeah, it's actually like a campaign style.
Oh, interesting.
There's an app that keeps track of whether you won or lost your previous mission, and then it actually changes the plot line of the overall story. It's very neat.
Oh, interesting.
Oh, wow.
I shouldn't have brought that up. As timely as it was, now I want to talk about Lord of the Rings. But first, what's everyone drinking tonight?
My answer is I'm drinking nothing, tragically.
Not even water. The rare not even water.
I know.
It's all right.
I'm feeling a little under the weather, so I have a medicinal dram of whiskey, and then I will be moving on to water.
That's a great name, but I'm not sure that's how it works.
Medicinal dram? I'm pretty sure that is.
Okay.
The alcohol kills all the germs that you might be having.
All right. All right.
Yeah, it's totally medicinal.
Definitely medicinal.
Okay. Silly me.
Go up to any old-timey doctor and they'll confirm that it's medicinal.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
I guess I just didn't realize we had traveled into the 1800s.
All of the oldest people in the world, you ask them how they're still alive and they say, oh, I have this pack of cigarettes a day and, drink a bottle of whiskey.
So are you also having a medicinal cigar this evening?
No, I am not doing that.
Well, I am having a non-medicinal glass of red wine, but we can all pretend I'm Gandalf while I'm drinking it. So it works. It fits. Oh, I'm going to make so many dumb references in this episode. I'm not sorry.
Go for it. Don't be sorry.
No apologies needed.
So rarely am I in a crowd, three's a crowd, where I can completely indulge in all of my dumb references and everyone will get them. It's very exciting.
Oh, I totally get that. That's how I feel with some friend groups. It's like, finally people who understand my obscure meme jokes.
Yes. My husband and I recently forced my parents to rewatch all of the Hobbit movies. So I'm very fresh right now.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And has anyone read anything good lately other than Sansûkh, the Hobbit / Lord of the Rings fan fiction, which is the general center of conversation for this evening?
I was feeling in a nonfiction mood, so I went back to Tolkien's letters, which I started ages ago and then had to put on pause because of all of the podcast reading. So I went back to that. There's one that I want to read out just for no particular reason other than I liked it. It's letter 302, May 2nd, 1968, from a letter to Time Life International Limited, Your ideas of the natural and mine are different, since I never in any circumstances do work while being photographed or talked to or accompanied by anybody in the room. A photograph of me pretending to be at work would be entirely bogus.
I like that. I like that.
Yeah, I feel you, Tolkien.
Very relatable.
Mm-hmm.
Oh gosh, honestly, the only thing I've been reading recently is I've been way, 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 way too obsessed with Final Fantasy XIV. So Final Fantasy XIV fan fiction, that's all I've been reading lately.
That counts.
It's reading. It counts.
Yep.
I have been reading unspeakable Hobbit fan fiction and also the speakable Hobbit fan fiction. So we're just going to move right on.
Oh, yeah. It's definitely always a mix of speakable and unspeakable.
Mm-hmm.
My AO3 browsing history is between me and God.
Yeah.
Oh, I have 2 accounts. There's the secret account, and then there's the secret account.
See, I only have the one account, and it's the one like people know my writing as. People know my writing. Nobody knows my real name in connection to it, but like my fan self has that account. But like there's a lot of fan fiction I won't like bookmark or save on my account, so I just have to remember the names of it in my head, and anytime I want to reread it, I have to go searching for it because I'm like, I'm not bookmarking some of the stuff I like because then other people can see my bookmarks.
I remember back in the day, before I had discovered AO3, I don't know when it was founded, but I will assume it was around. I had actually put ff.net or fanfiction.net, for those not in the know, like in my browser, like I had a folder.
Oh my god, that's amazing.
FFnet bookmarks.
Yeah.
Half of them were Yu-Gi-Oh!
Oh, spectacular. For me, it was Inuyasha and Naruto. That was my fanfiction.net. Also, 2008. I Googled it. That was when AO3 was started, 2008.
Oh, so it was before it existed, so I don't have to feel bad.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I mean, to be fair, I was on fanfiction.net technically when AO3 was around, but I don't like to talk about that.
Is it weird that I'm more embarrassed about using ff.net than I am about reading fanfiction?
Okay, see, oh gosh.
Okay, you're right.
That's a good question.
It's a bad sentence. Yeah, it's not embarrassing, but it's like, you know what I mean.
But like ff.net was all there was.
It's true.
For a long time. So I mean,
well, that and like specific sites like fandom or even ship specific sites.
Yeah.
Like all the individual archives.
Yeah.
Oh, and I never learned how to navigate LiveJournal. Like that was just beyond me.
I was a bit too young for the LiveJournal days.
I loved my LiveJournal and the LiveJournal fanfiction communities. There were some really good Prince of Tennis short stories on there.
Oh, classic.
Okay, so here's a can of worms that I'm going to open and then promptly kick far away that no one has to answer the question. Is it weird that they're all technically middle schoolers? Moving on.
Okay, I'm going to say no because I was in middle school when I discovered fan fiction, so I'm good.
There you go.
I mean, yes. I think when I started reading Prince of Tennis, I was in high school. I think I discovered it in high school. So yes, but I generally wasn't for Prince of Tennis. I generally wasn't reading the super smutty stuff. So not weird.
Nice save.
It was mostly Jen.
I feel like I want to get into this can of worms because I feel like I've seen so much fandom drama and discourse about this type of stuff, but I'm also like, no, I should leave the can of worms alone. I know better.
I mean, I'm the one who opened it very specifically.
I think the act of writing fan fiction about characters who are in middle school is not inherently bad or weird.
Also, they're not real people.
And they're not real people. Yeah.
That's always been my opinion, right? Okay, I'm getting into the can of worms. I severely apologize. There's going to be some worm animal cruelty or something.
It's all right. That's what this episode is now. Let's do it.
But so a lot of the discourse that you see is oh my God, how dare people like this, how dare adults reading stuff about teenagers or the problematic stuff. Honestly, this is my opinion with all the problematic things. And include literally anything. Yes, even that type of fan fiction. Pick the worst thing. Like, my opinion is always, is it tagged? Was any real people harmed in the making of this? If the answer is yes, it was tagged and no one was actually harmed, then you're fine. Write whatever weird, horrible stuff you want. That's the line.
So often I feel like the authors who are writing that stuff are very explicit in like the author's notes, like, yeah, this is weird. This isn't something you should do in real life. Or like, this is fiction. Don't go out and take this as some kind of like, life guide.
God, I read this fan fiction the other day where it was rated E for explicit. And in the tags, it was like, this is dark. This is not going to be a happy fan fiction. And there was like a long list of things that were like, fucked up, I want to say, but not really fucked. It's like, violent shit and like all that stuff. And it was basically a fan fiction where one of the main characters was like a serial killer. So of course it's going to be like a dark fan fiction or whatever. And like 3 chapters after the reveal that this dude was a serial killer and like shit was going to be bad, someone in the comments left this response that was like, how dare you write this? This could hurt some people to read. And I'm like, okay, if anybody gets past the like wall of tags saying that this is not going to be a Sunshine and Rainbows fan fiction, gets 3 chapters past the point where it becomes clear this is a fan fiction about a serial killer, that's on them, man. That's on them.
Yep. And especially when the fan fiction that deals with these darker themes is so self-aware.
Yeah.
I almost think it's worse when you read the fan fiction that's clearly written by someone very young and there's nothing gross in it, or gross. I'm going to use live language. You get what I mean. But it's a relationship that's clearly extremely imbalanced and unhealthy, but the writer doesn't even realize it. Isn't that worse?
Twilight. Anyway.
Yeah. Look at this really sweet abusive relationship. Like, no. No.
I totally get that. Like, I started in, Inuyasha and Naruto, and like Naruto in particular, there was a lot of just like horrible sexist shit. And everybody seemed, everyone seemed like they were between the ages of like 12 to 16 writing this really horrible sexist shit and just like kind of didn't get it at all. And I'm like, okay, I get if you're writing sexism into your fan fiction for whatever reason. If you're self-aware of that, like, it's fine. Because then you'll normally tag it and it reads like you're aware of it. But, a lot of, God, Naruto was a huge offender, probably because the creator of Naruto is a horrible sexist piece of shit. But, but yeah, that and like weird abusive relationships, like if it's written by somebody who's not aware of it being abusive, they get like, yeah, I don't know how I'm saying this. Words are complicated. You were right. I agree with you, Lily. TLDR, what Lily said.
Well, I also remember reading a lot of Inuyasha fan fiction where whoever the competitor was of the ship, the relationship, we're going to use so much slang in this episode. Sorry, not sorry.
Gonna have to include a glossary at the end.
Yes.
Yeah, for real. In the show notes.
Whoever was the competitor of the main relationship written about in the fan fiction was just completely lambasted.
Oh, yeah.
It was always a she, as you mentioned. And she was always just the worst, sluttiest, attention whoriest, terrible person. How dare she also like the boy that the main character liked?
Oh, yeah. Naruto fan fiction. One of my favorite characters was Sakura, but only Sakura written in fan fiction by people who did not ship Naruto and Sasuke. Because if it was fan fiction where people shipped Naruto and Sasuke, then no matter what version of, no matter if it was an AU, what part in the story they were at, Sakura was this horrible, bitchy, nasty girl. She was a nasty woman. Like, my favorite character in Naruto is Sakura written in fan fiction that does not ship Naruto and Sasuke.
Yep.
Yeah, I feel like that's a problem beyond just like these two fandoms, right? Like,
yes,
the female love interest is always just completely out of character and horrible and bitchy in a way that they aren't in the original work.
Well, the competitive love interest, who often is female if the writer is shipping 2 men.
Yes.
Right? The canon love interest. Oh, this was something I wanted to talk about. Entry-level fandom. Just the idea that there are those pieces of work. Whoa, that's a loaded phrase. I just realized there are those, fandoms.
Yes.
That people just discover the concept of fan fiction through. And they're always a little bit novice and probably pretty young. And so the works for that, main piece. Is there a different word than fandom? So I'm not just using the word fandom over and over again. There is, right? Or the original work that it's based on.
Like the original piece of media?
Yeah. And the entry-level stuff tends to have a lot of young writers and new writers, and not just writers, but participants in this world that tend to have a lot of similar pitfalls that I've begun to recognize over time.
Yes, the people participating in the fandom's wank, but don't know the term fandom wank because they are newbies to fandom.
Yes. I'm trying really hard to not call their work poorly done, because that's not fair. They're new. That's literally the whole point. They're allowed to be new.
Yeah.
But I'm also allowed to dislike the tropes that they use too much.
There is definitely a point to which you can tell if somebody's, oh gosh, I generally feel like you can tell if somebody's either very new to writing or very young. And oftentimes it's fine, but sometimes there is kind of that lack of self-awareness where they sort of don't know, oh gosh, you know how when you read a lot, you know what common tropes are, you know what cliches are. Oftentimes I feel like I see a lack of that sort of writing awareness in people who are newer to fandom. And oftentimes that does manifest in shit like, bashing the female character that's interfering with, the ship or something. Because, if you're newer, maybe you just haven't seen the fact that that's a super overdone trope. And once you do see that it's a super overdone trope, because you just spend so much time reading, you're like, oh, maybe it's kind of a problem that everybody writes this.
Yeah. Yeah. I also feel like I have sort of begun to avoid areas that I see as entry level because it's too much work to sift through all of the novice work to find well done fiction.
I feel like that's, in many respects, that's a factor of having been in a fandom as long as we've been in fandom. Because, for example, when I was first getting into reading fan fiction, I ate the novice stuff up, I loved it.
Yeah.
But as I've gotten older and as I've been more entrenched in fan fiction and fan fiction tropes, your tastes do evolve and you get a little pickier about what you read and the quality of what you're reading.
Oh, definitely. When I first got into reading fan fiction, again, back in middle school, my first fan fiction site was not fanfiction.net or LiveJournal. It was Quizilla.
Yes.
That's what we're talking about. So obviously I had no taste.
Or you had excellent
Sorry
taste.
for anybody who posted on Quizilla. I apologize. But yeah, no, I totally didn't really care whether somebody was experienced or inexperienced in writing, and generally couldn't even tell back when I first started. It's sort of one of those things where the more time you spend in fandom, the more you can learn to identify that. And it is just one of those cases of your preferences growing the more and more time you spend.
I remember the first time I was reading, it was Inuyasha fan fiction.
A classic.
Yes. And I had the thought of, but that's not actually how that character is in the show.
Right.
Just completely baffled. Wait a second. Why are they doing this? Why are they making her so terrible?
No, God, I remember. Okay, so this is definitely what I shipped in Inuyasha was I shipped Kagome and Sashomaru.
Who didn't?
Right? Although I gotta say, main female character shipped with her canon love interest's hot older brother was seemingly a thing I just really liked in anime fandom. Because, in Naruto, Sakura and Itachi, that was my ship. But anyway, in Inuyasha, it was Sashomaru and Kagome.
Also, both antagonists, which I feel like should not go unmentioned.
I know. Antagonists are just, it's antagonists, but oftentimes it's slightly morally gray antagonists.
Oh yeah,
they're
not
there's nuance there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's kind of all my favorite characters is hot antagonists who have, enough moral grayness to, yeah. Anyway,
trash villain, my trash villain.
Yes, my trash villain.
Yeah, trash villain.
So I'm really into Final Fantasy 14, and my absolute favorite character for anybody who plays Final Fantasy 14 is Emmett Sulk. And if you go into fandom, people are just like, yeah, I love that rat man. Like, that's what everyone calls him. Just, yeah, that rat man. And I'm like, yeah, that's what I'm here for. I'm here for the trash characters. Oh god, what was my original point? I had a point. Oh yeah,
Kagome and
Sesshomaru and Kagome.
Yep.
Yeah, and people would be horrible to Kikyo. Because she was always some like bitchy interloper who would like turn Inuyasha's eye or whatever. And I'm just like, no, she's a complicated character, but she's not just some like horrible person. And it just seemed like people were like, oh man, I have the opportunity to make a female character a horrible bitch. I'm going to take that opportunity because who cares about writing complex characters or, interesting characters when you could just make a woman a bitch? So much easier. I never even liked Kikyo. Like, I would watch Inuyasha and I'd be like, yeah, she's not even anywhere on my list of favorite characters. But after reading so much fanfiction that was just horrible to her, I'm like kind of protective of her almost. I'm like, yeah, I don't like her, but fuck everybody who hates her because they're terrible.
She deserves better.
That was exactly the character I was talking about. Yeah, poor Kikyo.
Poor Kikyo. She deserved better.
Yeah. And so if we like our morally gray, and especially fan fiction exploring relationships with morally gray characters, isn't Bilbo Thorin just the perfect opportunity?
It so is. Oh my god. Yes.
I don't know. I don't think Thorin counts as enough of a villain.
He's not a villain, but he's definitely a little morally gray.
Morally gray, I'll grant you. Yeah. But like,
he's one of those characters where he's morally gray in that he very clearly has his own moral code that mostly lines up with, what the reader would think of as like good guy actions. So like all his mistakes that he makes, I mean, obviously he's influenced by like gold sickness and debatably corruption of the Ring of Power, if you want to get into whether or not that's a generational corruption or not. Anyway, that's a whole nother debate. But like all his mistakes, all his bits that are like more morally gray are so clearly a result of like all the stuff that makes him a great person, like his devotion to his people. Like that's his failing, right? Which is, I guess, morally gray, but also just, oh god, it's good writing. That's what it is. It's good writing.
This just in, newsflash, Tolkien is a good writer.
I know, right? Shocking. It's almost like his works are popular, which I know is weird. Maybe.
What a concept.
I'm still angsty because I had an English teacher in high school who said all of his characters were black and white. And I was like...
That English teacher needs to be fired because they don't know how to read books. I know this is my opinion, but I'm correct, objectively speaking.
I mean, yeah.
Agreed.
I just remember going, like, obviously not enough guts to actually argue with the teacher, but just like, Gollum? Like, what? So we are ostensibly talking about Sansûkh today.
Yeah.
Which we did read. Oh, I remember. I started talking about entry-level fandom because I have always avoided Legolas Gimli pairings because the first couple of ones that I found were so painfully entry-level that it scared me away from the whole pairing entirely.
I mean, it's a pretty popular pairing, so there's definitely bound to be some bad stuff in there. Or stuff that you personally don't like. Again, I hesitate to label anything as bad.
Yeah, I mean, novice writers who are perhaps not as skilled, their writing is not bad, but I perhaps did not have the empathy to read it at that moment.
I feel that.
Is that enough sentences to say bad without saying bad?
Oh, no. I actually didn't read Sansûkh for the longest time. I went into Lord of the Rings fandom. So, fun fact for anyone listening to this, I hope someone's listening to this. Hi, listeners. Thank you for staying through all our rambling. If you go to AO3 and you go to the Lord of the Rings fandom and you just search by kudos, the number one most kudos fanfic is Sansûkh by like a lot. So I went into the Lord of the Rings fandom after rewatching the movies and like, oh wait, Legolas and Gimli are super in love with each other. I went into the fandom and something about, I don't know if it was the premise or just the fact that it was super popular. I was like, I'm not going to read that. It just seems like it's too popular to be good.
Or the fact that it's almost 600,000 words long.
See, that was actually, I'm not sure whether or not that was a deterrent.
That's sometimes a draw. I'm just saying. Like, yeah. I love me a good, meaty fan fiction that will last me more than like a day.
I feel like I just can't based on that, given that my main fanfic that I wrote was 1.4 million words. I feel like I have no leg to stand on here. And if I even try to judge what past me might have been thinking, it's just like, I have no step stool here. I nowhere to stand.
I will be the odd man out and say that I am a trash short fan fiction reader. And I would also like listeners to know that this fan fiction is almost to the word as long as the entire Lord of the Rings plus the Hobbit series.
And it is worth every word.
It's good. My voice went up at the end there. It's not Tolkien. It's good. I have opinions. I enjoyed every minute of it. I'll save that for later.
Oh, I mean, it's definitely one of those things where I don't know if any fan fiction can recreate the same type of like cadence and style as a writer like Tolkien, just because Tolkien was, oh gosh, all writers are a product of the time they write in. And writing styles have simply changed since then. And I think, honestly, if somebody tried to write a fan fiction in the same, style as Tolkien, it probably just wouldn't sound right.
Oh, I agree.
I feel like that would also be really miserable to write.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That'd be horrible.
Like, it would not be fun for anyone.
The author doesn't try to mimic his style, but I noticed while I was reading it that quite a bit, I've read about half of it as well. I'm on like chapter 26, 27 out of 51. And a lot of the contents of this fan fiction are scenes from Lord of the Rings, but just sort of from a different perspective with a little bit of extra stuff thrown in. I definitely found myself thinking, I just read this. So I read Lord of the Rings recently. And I don't think this fan fiction was written for me. One thing I think it does really, really well is it blended the movie world with the book world almost seamlessly. Like the canon choices that it makes between those two works is flawless, is so good. And I could see someone who's maybe only seen the movies reading this fan fiction and then maybe being interested in reading the books for the first time or getting some lore that they didn't have to begin with.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I read the books and God, I even read the Silmarillion, which don't. Unless you really liked Bible study, don't read the Silmarillion. But like reading this fan fiction, I definitely found myself getting more and more drawn into parts of, Tolkien's canon lore that I just never cared about or even really noticed all that much reading the books.
I wish that there was a version that I could read that was just the new parts. I could skip rereading all the Lord of the Rings stuff.
It gets more, I don't want to say disconnected from the canon stuff as it goes on, because more and more scenes start being from other characters' points of view. You get more and more of the dead dwarf peanut gallery, which I love. I think that's one of the official tags is the dead dwarf peanut gallery.
I found myself just reading to those parts. And I was like, okay, I know this, and dead dwarf. All right, I'll read this part.
They're really good. It does get less connected, or not less connected to the movie canon, but it deviates more and more from the movie canon. You get a lot more of what are the dwarves up to during the events of the book. You get some stuff with Galadriel and, oh my God, what's it called? The War Under the Trees, which was basically a war of attrition in Mirkwood and Lorien. I mean, you actually get Legolas and Gimli's relationship becoming like a romance, which you don't get in the movies. And so that's obviously all new. And you get more Bilbo and Thorin. And obviously that cannot be canon because Thorin is canonically dead. He's dead in this fan fiction too. Many characters in this fan fiction start dead and stay dead and yet also interact with the main cast. It's difficult to explain.
Oh, did I forget to give a spoiler warning again?
Yes, you did.
I'll edit it in.
Spoiler warnings.
I'll
Well,
edit it
okay,
in. It's
to
fine.
be fair, Thorin is dead is where the first chapter starts.
Right. I meant Lord of the Rings.
The first chapter's like, hey, Thorin died. Oh yeah, Lord of the Rings spoilers. Sorry if anybody hasn't heard of Lord of the Rings in the year of our Lord 2022.
And if you haven't, you're welcome.
Yeah, right.
No, that's actually something, like, I think I mentioned Legolas and Gimli is not a pairing that I have ever been particularly interested in. And this fanfic was the first time that I ever actually found myself invested in their relationship. And I think part of it is because it's not a very novice writer trying to do enemies to lovers in 2,000 words. Right? Like, this author is taking the time to actually build and uses a lot of the canon arc. And it's only now after Helm's Deep that we're actually starting to get romantic with it. And so it feels so much more natural.
Wait, okay, so you're after Helm's Deep. Oh my God. Right. What happened in Helm's Deep?
That's when Legolas realizes he's in love with Gimli. Yeah.
I remember that bit, and Aragorn's like, oh my God, I can't believe that you're finally realizing this now. I've been third wheeling for months. Poor Aragorn.
Poor Thorin throws a very big tantrum over it.
Oh yeah, he does not have a good time about that one. Even though like half his family has figured it out by then.
I'm pretty sure he's the last person to figure it out. Yeah.
Oh, he definitely is. Yeah. I think rereading it, I noticed every single time somebody else in his family picked up on Legolas and Gimli falling for each other, and Thorin's just like, why are you acting weird? What are you talking about? I don't get it. And they're just like, you'll figure it out later.
I don't think he's the last one, because I think Gimli doesn't know yet. Unless he knows, and we don't know.
Well, okay, but the last of the dead dwarf peanut gallery.
Okay. Does Gimli know and he just hasn't said it? That's fair.
There's some drama there.
That's something that I really enjoyed, was picking up the like hints that other members of the family were, figuring out what was going on, and Thorin just being completely oblivious.
Oh yeah. I love the dead dwarf peanut gallery. I love the members of his family so much. Honestly, it's so weird because I'll read this fan fiction and like one of my favorite characters, actually not part of the Dead Dwarf Peanut Gallery, an alive dwarf, is Dees, who never gets any screen time in the books or movies. But I love her so much. She breaks my heart, man.
She's been through hell. Yeah.
Yes, I love her. I know it gets worse.
How could it not? We're only at Helm's Deep.
You've all read the Lord of the Rings books, right?
Yes.
So Dane dies.
Yep.
So we do see that in the fan fiction, and definitely does not make me cry a lot.
Oh, I feel like, so at no point in this fan fiction have I actually burst into sobs, but I can't read, like, I have a bad habit of just like pulling my phone out and reading fan fiction in literally any social situation that I'm not immediately engaged in. But I can't do that with this.
And you are valid.
I can't do that with this because it just has me like at a low level misty eyes constantly.
I feel that.
Just a little tear, like not crying, just a little cry-y.
No, I think it's, oh my gosh, I want to say chapter 34 or chapter 36. I don't remember.
I'm impressed you remember that much.
Let's not talk about how many times I've read this fan fiction. It's many. But I'd been reading it, and I'd been kind of a little like, a little teary, a little misty-eyed, and I'd be like, oh my God, this is so good. And I was like a angsty teenager. No hate to angsty teenagers. I'm sorry. I know what it's like. It sucks. Your angst is valid, and it gets better. But I was like a teenager who hadn't cried in so long because I was like cold-hearted, jaded to the world. I read the chapter where Dane dies, and that scene just made me like start sobbing. And I was like, oh my God, I'm feeling emotions. Way too many emotions. I can't handle this. And sure enough, years later, it still makes me cry a little.
Good. As it should.
I mean, like that's
the
point of like good media, is to engender these emotions in you. So
I thought you were going to say make you cry.
Oh, well, yes, make you cry.
All the best
too.
media makes you cry. God, no, I can attest to that. All the best media makes you cry.
I cry at the drop of a hat, so it doesn't have to be good media to make me cry. Like, give me a pet commercial. I'm full on sobbing.
That's fair.
That's low hanging fruit. Everyone cries at those.
No, I've never cried for a video game before, But again, I've been playing way too much Final Fantasy 14, and the last 3 hours of the story, I was in tears the whole time for like 3 hours straight, just like nonstop sobbing. Yeah, that media definitely fucks you up.
So I will give just a one sentence premise of Sansûkh. We're in the dwarf afterlife and they are all watching Lord of the Rings happen. There you go. Boom. Oversimplification.
But it's queer as hell.
Yes. So there's some really interesting things that the author does with the concept of this dwarven afterlife. One of which that I love maybe the most is that the different generations of Thorin's family are more or less the age they were when they died, which means there are people who are much, much older than their parents. Thorin, I think, is older than his grandparents even in the afterlife, just because he managed to make it longer.
I think so. Yeah. I think it's, so if I remember correctly, I think it's not, I don't think it's you stay the age you were when you died. I think it's, gosh, what does Mahal say? The age at which you were your best self.
Right. But for people like Thorin's little brother who died when he was an adolescent.
Yes.
Poor
Frere, and I love him so much. He's such a baby.
He's the equivalent of 17 forever?
Yeah, pretty much.
Versus his nephews who are still young, but I would say maybe mid-20s. Translated greatly to regular human age, because I don't expect everyone listening to know.
I think they're in their 70s. I don't know.
They're at their dwarf 20s.
Yes.
But that's just such an interesting dynamic that I really appreciated the author considering, and just brings such a cool underlayer to all of that, all of those relationships and all of the storyline happening there. It's like, what would it be like?
Yeah, like the little world building details of how would this afterlife work. It's just all so good.
It feels very thought out. Like you can tell that the author put a lot of thought into the concept that they're building on, which I liked.
Well, because I think that the concept is canon.
Yeah. But how does that work? The author has thought about these things.
Yeah.
Tolkien is like, I don't know, they die and then they come back for the song later, because he's all about songs. That's about as much thought as he ever put into the dwarves.
Yeah, and also because Tolkien kind of let dwarves fall to the wayside. He forgot about the dwarves a lot.
Yeah.
He wrote The Hobbit and he was like, oh, dwarves are cool. And then he was like, oh, nah, man, I'm all about the elves. And he stayed that way forever.
Yeah. I think he acknowledged that he was a little uneven in his writing.
Yeah. No, he was self-aware about it. But one of the things that I've found really interesting after the Hobbit movies in particular came out, the number of people in fandom who are like, yeah, dwarves kind of aren't given any world building and not even much in the movies. And like a whole fanon dwarf culture has kind of been built organically from the bits and pieces we get in the movies and the books. And Sansûkh is definitely kind of one of the things, I don't want to say at the center of it, because that kind of fanon is so big and sprawling, and it's hard to determine what is the start, what's the center, like all that kind of stuff, but definitely is a large part of it. And there's a few other fan fictions that I don't remember the names of off the top of my head that are similar, like dwarf culture focused. I want to say something was written by Scarlet Jedi that was good.
There are also entire fanons around orcs, and like, what if the orcs had won, and what does culture look like? And hey, turns out they're people, they're not just monsters, bred for war, as the movie reminds us so many times.
Yeah. I'm
pretty sure Tolkien has explicitly apologized for the way he dealt with orcs, like verbatim, like, yeah, fucked up. I think he said those exact words.
Yeah, gosh, I remember him saying something about the way the orcs were or something. But, you see so many people who are just like... Okay, no, I was totally right. Sorry, I did just quickly go to AO3 to my subscriptions page. I was totally right. One of the other main dwarf fics that is really, really good is Comes Around Again by Scarlet Jedi. And that's another one that's kind of at the center of like cool dwarf canon. Anyway, yeah, sorry. I had to just really quickly look that up because otherwise it was going to have bothered me forever.
Did you know that if you type comes around again in Google, AO3 autofills? Either that or Google knows me.
Really? Yeah, honestly, Google's a little terrifying.
No, if I do it, it says comes around again by Scarlet Jedi.
Oh, okay. Mine was comes around again AO3, which did bring me to the correct fanfiction. Hey, this is not actually a question, but something I noticed that is definitely a fanon thing is that Dory is the vision of dwarven beauty.
Yeah, that one's such a fanon thing, and honestly, I love it.
Every single fan fiction, and I'm always so curious, like, who was the first person who was like, I'm going to make this a thing?
I don't know. I think it's because, like, okay, I wasn't here for this part of fandom when this was come up with, but I think there's a line in the Hobbit book, where it's mentioned that Dory is the strongest of the group. And so I think people are like, oh, if, strength is like a really sexy thing in dwarves, then like Dory being the strongest would make him really attractive to people.
I mean, it makes sense.
Which I vibe with. Yeah.
It also feels a little bit like Teenage Rebellion because the Dory in the movie is not like typically conventionally attractive by Hollywood standards. And so it does feel a little bit like fandom going, fuck you guys.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. No, that's one of the things that I do really love about the Hobbit fandom in particular, like the dwarf corner of the Lord of the Rings fandom, is a lot of rebellion against like Hollywood beauty standards. So much fan art of these like absolutely gorgeous dwarf women with their like incredible beards and like thick eyebrows and that kind of stuff. And by the way, that leads me to a thing I'm super mad about, is if you have seen all the like teaser images for the Amazon TV show, they introduce a dwarf lady and she does not have a beard. And honestly, shame on Amazon. They should all be fired just for that.
Shame on Amazon.
I know, right?
Are you telling me that the Amazon adaptation of Lord of the Rings isn't going to be like a thoughtful fan recreation of the story?
Yeah, see, elves are ageless, so they decided that Cate Blanchett was just too old to play Galadriel. So clearly Amazon knows exactly what they're doing. I will die mad about that.
Her scenes are the best in the Hobbit movies.
She's so
She's
good.
incredible.
Like who looks at Cate Blanchett and is like, yeah, I don't know, she's not pretty enough to play Galadriel anymore because she's a little bit older now. Like
Monsters.
Horrible people, terrible executives. Yeah. No hate to the actress that they cast as younger Galadriel in the Amazon TV show. I don't want to be like, oh, I hate that actress or whatever, because obviously it's not her fault. That was not a decision she had any part in making. But whoever decided that they would not bring Cate Blanchett back was a coward.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. 100% agreed. Do love me some Galadriel.
Yeah, that was a tangent. Sorry.
No, I'm just now thinking of Galadriel and I can't bring my brain back to what we were talking about.
Oh, she's so pretty. I remember the first time I watched Lord of the Rings, the movies, I think I might have been in middle school, possibly elementary school. I don't remember. Don't quote me on anything here. I remember I had such a crush on Galadriel. One of my friends was like, oh my God, Aragorn's so dreamy. And I was like, yeah, but he's covered in a layer of grime and Galadriel looks like flawless at all times. Why? Why would you have eyes for anybody other than Galadriel in this?
She is incredible.
And I stand by that statement, even though now I do appreciate Aragorn and his slightly grimy attractiveness. I still stand by Galadriel is the most beautiful, hottest, sexiest character.
All of those things are 100% true.
Thank you. Thank you.
I feel like Aragorn and Geralt from The Witcher are my two grimy hero boys.
I saw this great thing that was like the reason Geralt appeals to so many people is because he's in the center of the Venn diagram of people who had a crush on Legolas and people who had a crush on Aragorn. He's right in the center.
That's true.
That is accurate.
I just remember when I was going through my Aragorn phase and then they get to Return of the King and they gave him a shower. And I'm always like, no, why would you do this?
He looks so terrible at the end when they clean him
Don't
up.
do that.
I mean, fortunately, it's only for like one scene, but still, they ruined
Yeah.
him.
Some men just should be grimy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They made his beard look not scruffy, too. They made his beard look like well taken care of, and that was the greatest offense to
Mhm.
me. It wasn't necessarily that they like washed his hair because like, okay, whatever. But whatever they did to his beard, I just know.
Because we have not yet had a movie that is just 100% Kate Blanchett as Galadriel the entire time, I have been forced to look at the other characters on the screen. And I think Thorin Oakenshield was the first character with graying hair. I mean, graying, not gray, that I was like, oh, I get it.
God, there's something about characters that have like just a bit of salt and pepper somewhere that can be very, very nice. And Thorin definitely,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Intellectually, I had always known that, but I think I was like in college when the Hobbit movies came out. And so I was finally old enough to be like, that's actually a real person and not just an adult 5,000 years away from me.
Yeah, no, it's weird. It's like when I was a kid, there were definitely characters in, movies and stuff where I don't know if it was just the actors or what hair and makeup did to the actors, where they looked so pretty that they almost looked like plastic. And so I never really had a thing for them. Like, I had a crush on Galadriel because she's beautiful and flawless, but she doesn't look like she's flawless.
But she's also terrifying.
Yeah, she's terrifying. Like the scene where Frodo offers her the ring and like, step on me, queen, please. But like, as a kid, I was like, oh my God, she's so pretty because she looks like a real person. She looks ethereal, but she doesn't look fake. And so I think characters, who have like that kind of salt and pepper, it makes them look real. It makes them move away from like a more plasticky, sterilized type of attractiveness that you see in a lot of Hollywood movies.
Agreed. And then you get Thorin and, I should probably know his name. I do. It's on the tip of my tongue and it's not a stick bug. Armitage?
Yeah, Richard Armitage.
Oh, Richard
you.
Armitage, yeah.
Richard Armitage and Martin Freeman do a great job of ruining everything. I feel like the books are not, like they definitely have gray area dialogue with each other, but their chemistry is not nearly as unavoidable as it is in the movies.
Yeah, in the movies, it's definitely front and center.
They were conspiring.
Well, I mean, I think part of it also is that in the books, oh gosh, this is where I'm going to say I kind of don't like this about the movies. I like that the movies gave more focus to Thorin because in the book, he is kind of one of many dwarves, and in the movie, he is definitely more of a central character. I don't like that they started kind of completely ignoring the rest of the dwarves in favor of Thorin and then Killy's romance with Tariel, which I'm kind of annoyed that they added because it felt kind of out of nowhere. Also, I feel so bad for Evangeline Lilly. She was offered the role as Tariel, and she was like, cool, just don't put me in a love triangle. And they were like, we're going to put you in a love triangle specifically to screw you over.
I will defend until the day I die that it's not a love triangle because Legolas never fights.
Oh, I don't think it is either.
He's just like, cool, let me go save your new boyfriend. That's not a love triangle.
No, I don't think of it necessarily as a love triangle. I think the thing that annoys me is that it's very clear that they were trying to portray a love triangle. Like you can see that they were like, we're going to do love triangle bait here. Honestly, my personal headcanon is that Legolas is just really afraid because Tauriel is his only friend, and he's really afraid that if she starts hanging out with Killy, she's going to make another friend, and she's not going to like him as her best friend as much anymore.
Headcanon accepted.
Yeah, I mean, he never actually says he likes her. It's just Thranduil who's like, he must have a crush on you.
I don't really know what the movie, what the director or the writer or whoever was thinking when they came up with that, but it's definitely something that I kind of headcanon my way around. But it is kind of annoying that we got a lot of focus taken away from the rest of the dwarves in the second and particularly the third movie.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's just not, I don't think it's a format where they would have been able to give all of the dwarves something going on.
Well, I think they could have because they definitely had more of a good vibe in the first movie. In the first movie, it feels like Thorin is clearly a main character, but you get a lot more of the other dwarves as well. And then in the second and third movie, it just feels like they kind of force them into the background.
Yeah, their personalities feel a lot flatter in the second and third movies than they do in the first, which I think that they could have gotten around if they weren't so busy focusing on these other relationships that they wanted to bring in.
No, I saw an interview saw or read, I don't remember, an interview given by one of the actors who plays, God, I don't remember which of the dwarves they play, but they play one of the unfortunately relegated to the background dwarves. And they were talking about how in the first movie, the actors were really given kind of free rein to think of, what their characters' personalities might be like, what their kind of group dynamics would be like, and then allowed to show that on screen and, add in stuff in the background and that kind of thing. And then apparently, according to this actor, in the later two movies, that was all just kind of gutted. Like they were kind of just told, like, nah, you don't get to have screen time. You don't really get to add in anything. The focus is on Thorin and all this new, like, not a love triangle, but all that new stuff. And I think that was kind of a shitty decision because the group dynamics you see in the first movie are amazing and they add so much color to it.
I agree completely. I'm not sure that's that different from the book, though. I feel like in the book, they were like, 2 of them got yellow cloaks, 3 of them got blue cloaks. All right, let's go.
It's weird because it's not like you get a lot more in the books, but in the books, it's a lot more evenly distributed nothing, if that makes sense. Like, it feels like the movies kind of decided to do weird favoritism. And in the books, it was just kind of like a lot of people were kind of flat just because that was how the book was.
Yeah. I mean, it's a kid's book. It's not nearly as complex as Lord of the Rings.
It is a kid's book, yeah.
And that's okay. It's okay to have books written for other age groups.
Well, that's why we have fan fiction to,
Also, yes.
broaden those characters.
This is what fan fiction was made for.
Exactly.
When stories give us these just huge hanging, like, what ifs, how can you not just sort of start to fill in those blanks?
I know. You got to do all the fix-it fan fiction.
Did we ask? We've kind of covered how we got into fan fiction. I lost my notes.
We have, and we've talked a little bit, Ciel, about how you avoided Sansûkh because it was too popular. It's too powerful.
It was, yeah, I had bad experiences, again, because I came from anime fandoms, where the really popular stuff was kind of the shittiest. That was oftentimes where you'd see a lot of the, like, female character bashing was in, like, the really popular stuff. So I kind of avoided Sansûkh because it was pretty long and it was kind of too popular in my head because, I'd had that bad experience in past fandoms. And there are a lot more relationships in it besides just Gimli and Legolas. And at the time I was like, oh, I'm kind of specifically looking for Gimli and Legolas fan fiction. So, I'll go to that beautiful, beautiful realm of 5,000 to 20,000 word one shots, yes, which is just a sweet, sweet spot of fan fiction. So, like, I went through basically all of AO3 and I was like, oh, no, I really want something meatier than this. Like, I want that long fic. And so by the time I'd gone back to the start of the kudos list again and saw this really long fan fiction, I was like, all right, I'll give it a try. I'll see if there's anything here or if it's like my other experiences where the popular stuff is bad. And nope, it was so good. I became so obsessed with it so fast. It threw me down into the fan fiction train like I had not been before. I read it and then, like, 4 months later or something, by the time I'd, like, finished it and digested it and become way too obsessed with it and then done my reread of it, I ended up writing again, and I hadn't written for a really long time. But there's something about really good media that inspires you to create. And I mean, I think that's a summary of all fandom, basically, in a way.
You dedicated your novel, Bluebird, to Sansûkh, if I remember correctly.
I did, to the writer, yeah.
Was that because of that inspiration?
Yeah, it was because that I wrote some fan fiction in middle school and for high school, but I kind of just stopped writing after I graduated high school. And Sansûkh was the thing that got me back into writing, and specifically got me into writing in a way where I was actively trying to write something I was happy with and write in a way where I was improving my own skill. Because previously, I'd written some fan fiction, but it was always just kind of like I wasn't really thinking about how to write well and how to produce good work. And so after reading Sansûkh and starting to write for a completely different fandom, it wasn't Lord of the Rings, there was definitely a focus in my head on thinking about how to be a good writer. And then I just never stopped writing and eventually got a book published.
Hey,
as one does.
Yeah.
I know, right?
before we started recording, you mentioned the sort of not fraught necessarily, but in my mind, the great pitfall of reading long fan fiction, especially ones that have not been finished yet.
I know.
Could you tell that story for the listeners?
I personally I will read unfinished fan fiction.
No.
I will read unfinished long fic.
I will too. You and me both.
There's this one fan fiction I'm reading right now. It's so good. It's not even particularly long. I think so far it's only about 30,000 words. But I started reading it when it was only, I think, 3 chapters, and now it's 10 or 11, I want to say. And it updates relatively frequently. And every time I get that AO3 email, it's like a burst of serotonin. It's like better than doing drugs. And so for me, that's one of the things I read unfinished fan fiction for. I read it, I subscribe to it, and then when I get those AO3 emails, it's just like, who needs cocaine? I have AO3, your favorite fic is updated emails. Like, I don't need anything else.
On the other hand, it's really tragic when there's a fic that is excellent, was updating on a regular basis, and then just goes dark for, with no explanation, and you don't hear from them ever again.
Yeah, that definitely happens.
Yeah.
I mean, I think for me, part of it, I wrote a super long fan fiction, and it spanned basically about 4 years. But, I would not have finished it if I didn't have people reading and replying to every chapter. And so I think knowing what kind of motivation that can give a writer, as somebody who writes long fic and doesn't post all of it at once, I know that if everybody in fandom only ever read stuff that was completed, very few things would get completed. Because there's an extent to which in fandom, you really rely upon that chapter by chapter feedback in a way you don't with published writing.
Yeah. And I mean, don't get me wrong. I love unfinished work. I read it very happily. I mean, sadly when I get to the end of it, but
I've definitely felt that tragedy of stuff that I know is never going to get completed, but I don't know, it's worth it, because even if it's a tragedy that's never going to get finished, you still got something good out of it.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's worth it. It's just that sometimes I'll go back to these fics that were being updated on a regular basis when I first started reading them, and got to a certain point and then have been dropped for whatever reason. Maybe I'll never know. Maybe they'll get picked up again. Maybe they won't. But I'll go back to them sometimes because there was something in them that I really enjoyed and I want to reread what there is. And then each time I do that, I regret that, I don't know what happens next. And I may or may not ever know what happens next.
That's what your imagination's for. Write mental fan fiction of fan fiction.
I would rather have the chapter.
Oh, same. No, I know what you mean.
But that does bring up the idea of fan fiction based on other fan fiction, which I think is a delicious rabbit hole.
There is Sansûkh fan fiction. There is fan fiction for Sansûkh. I have read some of it. It's very good. Yeah, you will get fanfic of fanfic. Sansûkh is filled with fan art because people have done so much fan art for this fan fiction. I've done fan art for it.
That was something I thought was really cool about Sansûkh. We mentioned how this is one of the fan fictions that really helped sort of create this fandom version of dwarven culture. And at the beginning of each chapter, I think it's each chapter, the author gives a little bio for one of the original female dwarven characters.
Yeah, Mita Dworodam. I love those.
And I just think that's such a wonderful, especially for an author who's clearly so familiar with the Middle-earth lore as a whole. I mean, not to gatekeep, but it's a different vibe, right? Someone who's only seen the movies could invent a bunch of Dworodams and it would feel different.
Yeah.
There's just so much thought and care put into this. I mean, it's that joke in Lord of the Rings, right? Everyone thinks there are no lady dwarves, Dworodam, but they don't use that word.
I know they don't because they're wrong. I don't know why they added that joke into the movies, because it is kind of weird, and I don't even think it's necessarily canon, Tolkien canon.
Or is it making fun of Tolkien for just not writing any female characters?
I mean, it might have been. It might have been. Yeah, Tolkien's female character department is a little limited. Just a tiny
I would argue I'm definitely splitting hairs now. I don't know. I've read arguments that he's sexist. And I
don't think he is.
He's not a misogynist. He may be sexist in that he views men and women differently, but I don't think he's a misogynist.
I don't think Tolkien's a misogynist. I think, again, this is one of those weird product of the times thing. I think in part because of Tolkien's, his history as being a soldier, which very clearly informs so much of Lord of the Rings. Like, clearly he was serving with other men. Not to be like, women weren't involved in the wars ever. None of the wars. They were gone from all of them. Because that's obviously not true. But he would have been mostly surrounded by men. And so that's why I think why you see a lot of really strong male friendships in The Lord of the Rings is because that would have been his experience. And there are female characters, but there's very few of them. But I think for me, the thing that makes it, I don't want to say not a problem, because obviously I do love fan fiction like Sansûkh, where they add in way more female characters and gives ones that are there more screen time. But I think for me, the thing that makes me not mind it about, original OG Tolkien is all of his female characters are written like they are fully fleshed out people. And I feel like a lot of sexist media, even really modern stuff, a lot of really modern stuff, actually, it's like, oh, this is the female character. Yep. She is sexy and has 3 brothers, so she knows how to fight sexily while her boobs are jiggling. She's female. And I feel like in Tolkien, you just don't get any of that. Maybe you still have the 1 women to 10 guy, gender ratio, but all the female characters are so different from each other, and they all have their own personalities and backstories. Like, they all have their own place in the lore in the same way that the men have. And they're all treated with respect. Like, I don't know. That's what I like about it. And that's what makes me almost in a way give Tolkien a free pass. Like, obviously, I think he should have had more female characters in the books because it's so clearly a product of the times. And because he treated all his female characters with such respect, I'm kind of like, okay, that's not the thing I'm going to be annoyed about.
And also, if you go to, like, if you look outside of The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, like, obviously it's still very heavily male dominated, but there are so many more female characters who exist outside of those like core books
and in positions of power, which I think is important. Yeah, right. It's not just like, all the male characters have a wife. Right.
Oh yeah, it's like, hey, so that story about Luthien and Beren? Anyway, Beren was just some dude. Let's talk about Luthien. She was amazing. And I'm just like, yes.
I feel like Tolkien puts all of his female characters on a pedestal, which is maybe a little
almost
over the top, but I'm
okay
with it.
I mean, there are definitely female characters in the books that are less central that, aren't on pedestals, but there's definitely
the midwife in Gondor.
The midwife in Gondor. She's such a meme. Okay, I have some great news for you, which is that she is in Sansûkh.
Oh my god! Okay, that alone is going to make me finish this fan fiction.
But yeah, like characters like that who are, more in the background, that obviously they're not on pedestals, but again, they're still treated like fleshed out characters. They have their own personalities and everything. But I think there's definitely an extent to which Tolkien, gosh, okay, like again, this is a psychoanalysis of Tolkien and how his time, in the war impacted his writing. But I think there's an extent to which, if you were on the front lines serving with other male soldiers, you would go home to your mother or your sister or your wife, and that would be a place where you could be safe. So I feel like it makes sense in my head that a lot of female characters are in these positions of power because, like, in Tolkien's mind, the women he knew in his life probably were connected with places of, of safety or of love and stuff like that. And I feel like that would translate into his writing.
I feel that.
Sorry, Ghost of Tolkien, if I got it wrong.
I mean, he had Beren and Luthien inscribed on his and his wife's tombstones.
I know. Oh my god.
Like, he's clearly identified with the really gorgeous, out of his league elven maiden, and then the like quote unquote schlubby human man who's in love with her turns up a lot in his lore. I wonder why.
I mean, that was kind of Arwen and Aragorn as well.
I think in the book, they're even like, wow, this story is just like ours.
Yeah. Oh my God. There's this bit. Oh my God. I think it was Tolkien actually talking about, like, I think it was like he and his wife were on a walk and, the leaves were falling from the trees and she like stopped to dance in them. And he was like, this is the most beautiful woman I've ever met in my entire life. I love her so much. And then wrote that specific scene into, like, I think Aragorn and Arwen's romance and also Beren and Luthien, because he was just like, I need everybody to know how amazing my wife is at all times.
Like, he has a one-track mind. Maybe that's why there aren't a bazillion women, because there's just only one woman, and that's his wife, and she just has to be everybody.
Tolkien, the original wife guy.
There are some writers who, when I see recurring themes in their work, I go, ooh, this is a you situation. And that's just not a vibe that I get from his female characters.
Yeah.
They're also not all the same. I joke they're all his wife, but they're not really. Maybe his worship of them is a holdover from how much he loves his wife, but they're all different people.
I mean, like, definitely, like Arwen and Luthien are not the same character. Like, they have different personalities, they do different things, they serve different roles kind of in the narrative, even though they have that scene in common. So yeah, there's definitely not that sense of like they're all the same.
Exactly. I agree. All right. Tolkien defense hour is over. I'm glad we all agree. He's the greatest.
All right, Ghost of Tolkien, you can go back to your grave now. We're not going to insult you anymore.
Okay, can I just take this one soapbox moment to complain? They just need to do one movie, The Lay of Luthien. It's got everything.
Yes, you are right. We're correct in every conceivable way.
It's got action. It's got a strong female lead. It's got cool lore. It's got big monsters. You don't need to make it 5 movies long. Like, just one movie, Lay of Luthien. Boom. Done.
It would be like what Rogue One is to the larger Star Wars movie canon. AKA, Rogue One was the only good spin-off movie for Star Wars. All the other things have been garbage. Sorry to tell you, Solo was a bad movie, but it was. But yeah, I completely agree with you on that. I completely
They wouldn't even have to change anything.
You're correct.
Like, it's perfect.
I know, they wouldn't. Like, with the shitty Amazon TV show that I'm gonna die mad about, like, the way they have to condense and fiddle with so much of the story in order to have it make any type of sense on screen, you just wouldn't have to do any of that with Luthien.
Nope. So I know you said don't read the Silmarillion. Just read that one chapter. That's all you got to read. just.
Or you could read the individual book.
Is there a book? I didn't know there was a whole book for it.
Yeah, Baron and Luthien.
Yeah, Baron and Luthien's a book. Children of Hurin also.
Yeah.
There's a lot of side books about bits in the Silmarillion.
I've read some of the unfinished tales, but...
Well, Christopher Tolkien spent a lot of his time, a lot of his end years, putting together books that have the multiple versions of the stories. So the Baron and Luthien individual book has 3 different versions that Tolkien wrote.
Okay, so it's not the story turned into a novel length. Okay.
No. I mean, it is the different versions that Tolkien wrote, all set in one
volume.
Book.
Okay, that's cool.
It's like the Baron and Luthien lore book, almost.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, that'd be perfect. Producers, what's wrong with you?
That should be made. Nobody give it to Amazon.
No.
Someone should give it to Peter Jackson instead.
Literally anyone but Amazon.
Yeah, literally anyone but Amazon. God, every single thing I see about that TV show just makes me want to fucking throw my TV out a window.
People who casually know me know that I love Lord of the Rings. 3 guesses why. And they're like, "Oh, are you excited?" And I'm like, "Yeah, so excited." Because I'm not going to get into the whole thing, so I just lie.
Oh, I don't. I get into it.
I mean, it could be good.
It could be, but have you seen pictures of what Celebrimbor looks like?
No, I have not, actually.
bad.
I'm basically avoiding everything. I'll watch the show, probably. I say probably only because I don't watch a lot of TV, but I will probably make an exception for this.
No, I watched Wheel of Time for you. You have to watch the Lord of the Rings show.
You didn't watch all of Wheel of Time.
I watched enough.
I mean, I will watch Lord of the Rings.
I will, but I'm probably from what I've seen, I know myself well enough to know I will watch it and I will probably be mad the whole time.
But also, okay, sometimes it's fun to be mad about that and not mad about bigger things.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I will drunk hate watch the 2005 Pride and Prejudice any day. I'm sorry if you like that movie. It's bad.
No apologies necessary.
I know this is my opinion, but
I just don't want to make a judgment call on the TV show until I've watched it, at which point I will happily call it bad.
There you go.
I think it's fair to see maybe some of the visual choices, like not giving Dwarrodams beards, and extrapolate to say,
yes.
I feel like they maybe don't appreciate the spirit of the lore. And that might translate into a not great adaptation.
I've read a lot of Tolkien scholars saying like they think they're cautiously optimistic. So if they're cautiously optimistic, I will allow myself to be cautiously optimistic. I don't know if that's going to be true, but like I'm willing to reserve judgment at this point in time. That may not stand. But
yeah, I don't know. I feel like everything I've seen just seems to not be in the spirit of the work in the same way, like the original trilogy, you know, it took liberties. There were deviations from the books, but it all felt so in the spirit of what the stories were about. And I feel like the things that I see about the TV show don't feel that way. Like, yeah, maybe some of it's, you know, correct in terms of the lore, but it doesn't mean it's going to be good. Like the pictures of Elrond where he has this weird short hair and he looks like he walked off the cover of a, you know, poorly funded boy band and then they stuck plastic ears on him. There
are definitely some choices that I side-eye Amazon for. Like, don't get me wrong.
I know. But then, and I think that was, God, was it in like Empire or Vanity Fair? I don't remember. But it was like the official Amazon description. They're like, yes, Elrond, the politically ambitious young elf. And I was like, you have never read anything.
Oh, no.
Elrond, he's so politically ambitious.
I think it might be, well, it's definitely going to be a spectacle. I think it'll probably be a fun TV show. I am much more on the fence about whether it's going to feel like Middle-earth. I think that's kind of where I am.
Yeah.
The trailer looks kind of like every fantasy thing that's come out in the past 10 years. It doesn't look unique in the way that the movies did. Like the movies have this something about the color grading or the limited use of CGI or the models they used. It all feels like it's not going for realism. It's going for like a watercolor painting, which makes it kind of timeless. Like you watching them now, they're like 20 years old and they hold up because they
don't say they're that old.
They're not, they are though. They came out in the early odds.
I mean, yes, I know you're right, but don't say that.
Okay, they came out a few years ago.
Thank you.
Better. But you know, they have that feeling where it feels like you are watching a story. You are not watching something that is trying to be hyper realistic. And the TV show trailers have been so CGI heavy that they've lost that. They don't have that painting feel to them. They don't look like they've been made with watercolors. They look like they were made wherever the hell Disney churns their Marvel movies out of. It looks so generic almost. And I think that is one of the things that really disheartens me. Just because, you know, if you watch the movies, they're beautiful. Every frame is beautiful. Yes, I'm including that one where Elrond is weirdly floating in front of Frodo's head or whatever the fuck that was. I'm including that. Don't at me. Like, you know, the movies are so beautiful, and the TV show, like the bits we've seen in the trailer, the aesthetic of it does not look memorable. That's that rant. Also, I'm definitely side-eyeing them because they were like, oh yeah, we're gonna do the second age and only the second age, and in the trailer we put a shot of the two trees, and I'm like, careful, the Tolkien estate has snipers and they will come after you.
They're apparently working with Simon Tolkien. It just came out that he's been like a consultant or something.
Oh, I didn't know that. I haven't seen that bit, but that doesn't surprise me actually.
So maybe the writing will end up being decent, and it's just that their designers are all, I don't know, interns.
Honestly, I feel like the interns would do a better job, but
yeah.
I don't know. I don't have high hopes. I was really excited when I heard that there's going to be a TV show, and I feel like everything I've seen since then has just made me less and less optimistic about it, which is a shame. And I do hope that they prove me wrong, but
I think, what is it? A plan for the worst, hope for the best. If we go into the show expecting it to be terrible, we'll find stuff to complain about. But I can find stuff to complain about things that I love. I don't need help.
Oh God, same.
That's why they invented fan fiction.
It's so true. God, I'm remembering me back in like 2016 or something where I started playing one video game and I was like, oh, this is good. Oh no, it's made so many mistakes. Well, I guess I'm gonna have to write 1.4 million words fixing it because I'm mad.
So maybe this is going to be the TV show production that creates so much new Middle-earth fan fiction.
I mean, that would be great, honestly. I would love to see more second age fan fiction. You do generally see a focus around, I mean, obviously the movies, but I would love to see more fan fiction from other ages of Middle-earth because boy, is there a lot.
That I'm calling that the mithril lining of the TV show.
Yes. Okay, exception, you do see a lot of Angbang. If you know what that is, you know what that is. If you don't, good.
And we'll just leave it at that.
So, Ciel, thank you so much for coming on. This has just been an absolute blast to talk about fanfiction, Lord of the Rings, Sansûkh, basically all things Tolkien. Before we give you your evening back, can you, A, tell us a little bit about any current projects you might be working on, if there's anything that you can tell, and then B, tell our listeners where you can be found on the internet and where they can buy your book, Bluebird.
I guess the thing that I'm working on now is I've just sent a final version of my next thing to my agent. So hopefully that'll get on submission and get a deal. And that is Vampire Escape Room featuring threesomes.
Excellent.
I need it.
It's funny because I wrote that and that I'm also writing a vampire threesome fan fiction. And so when I'm talking to my friends, I have to specify which vampire threesome I'm talking about, which is a great problem to have. So I'm working on that. Next things I have in the works are a sort of magical murder mystery and a fantasy, I guess, historical romance about counterfeit coin and money laundering.
Ooh. Well, I can't wait to read all of
Hopefully
those.
I'll get permission to write that one. Buy my book on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million. I think you can buy it directly from Penguin Random House or Angry Robot in the UK, and Penguin Random House is the US distributor. I am on Twitter at Ciel Pierlot. No spaces, no dashes, no nothing. Very uncomplicated. I snagged my name before anybody else could because my name's weird and no one had taken it. And then my website is cielpierlot.com. I am also currently doing freelance editing. So if you want me to look at your manuscripts, your synopsis, your query letter, what have you, check my website out and I can help you.
Great. Well, we'll link to those things below so everyone can check out your work and maybe send you some work.
Yeah, send me your stuff.
Oh, this has been so much fun. I love talking about fan fiction.
God, don't we all?
And taking it probably more seriously than it needs to. But that's not fair because it's really good sometimes. Sometimes.
That is correct. Oh, God. I mean, that's the great thing about fan fiction is that because there's no barrier to entry, you get like a whole breadth of quality that you just don't get in traditional publishing.
That's for sure.
You see it a little. You see that kind of breadth a little bit in terms of freelance publishing because freelance publishing, self-publishing. I know what words are because again, with self-publishing, you don't have to like go to an editor or an agent and be like, take my work seriously. You could just put your stuff up on Amazon. But I think you see much more of that sort of all across the spectrum in fan fiction. Donate to Archive of Our Own.
Yes, they do so much important work with keeping fan fiction alive and works of, transformative works.
Yes, the Organization of Transformative Works, the OTW, as it were. Not to be confused with an OTP, which is, again, fandom terminology.
You will find all of Ciel Pierlot's links below and maybe a glossary. We'll see how extra we're feeling.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Fiction Fans.
Come disagree with us. We are on Twitter and Instagram at FictionFansPod. You can also email us at fictionfanspod@gmail.com.
If you enjoyed the episode, please rate and review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and follow us wherever your podcasts live.
Thanks again for listening, and may your villains always be defeated. Bye.
Bye.